the fun thing with you is that you make animation and comics.
I have
Um,
dabbled in both, yes.
Oftentimes people get into animation from wanting to tell stories, and then you often hear like, "Oh well, animation is just comics with more drawings," or like, "Comics is just animation with less drawing." I'm like, "No, it's not.
No,
It's not."
no. Whoever said that, needs to get their brain replaced. What are they talking about? No. Yeah, they both have drawings, but that's as far as it goes.
Well,
Like,
but
yeah,
like,
there's
"Oh,
some
but you do animation. Can you make a comic for me?" It's like, "No."
I mean, no, no, it's like, you know what that sounds like? It reminds me of this really great line by the comedian Mitch Hedberg, who I used to love. And he said, like, he talked about being a comedian, and they said, like, can you write? Can you write scripts? And he says, like, they think that these are just interchangeable skills I can do. It's not like going up to a cook and saying, all right, you're a cook. Can you farm?
"Can you butcher a cow?"
Can you butcher a cow? It's like, no. like,
Okay,
like
so we
just
we
'cause-
we we agree that it's not exactly the same. But what do
I
you
mean,
enjoy most about each of the mediums?
well, what I do like about both is that they are both creative processes that rely on similar principles, although there are distinctions between the two. Actually, I'll start with comics first.
Yeah, go
The
for it.
thing I like about comics a lot is that, and this is coming from an animator's perspective,
Uh-huh.
it's a more digestible format personally for me to convey the kind of stories I want because animation is great, but it's also time consuming. And that's kind of why I like the format of comics for Tinder Skitty versus if I were to animate it, because on a consistency basis, I'm able to at least put out comics more regularly because I only need to worry about a page at a time rather than scripting it out, boarding it, laying everything out, and then like rough passing the animations and shots, tying them down, and then like inking, coloring, cleaning up, and all that stuff. Basically, comics are like a more concentrated form of that in like still images. I mean, obviously there's different stuff. There's sequential art, there's paneling, there's
Of
all that
course.
thing. But, even though it's still a lot of work, it's a more digestible process to convey ideas for me personally than the months it would take me to like finish a single animation. What I like about animation, on the other hand,
Mhm.
is that yes, it's more work, I feel, and more steps and processes to get to like a larger piece of media to put out, but the catharsis of that work paying off when you release it is amazing.
The what?
A catharsis, like the feeling that like the release, like the emotional release of having this thing done.
Oh, yeah, it's like when people say it's like having a baby.
You spend months and months incubating this thing in you, and then you finally just pop it out after months, and it's just like, oh, it was a lot of pain getting this thing out, but look how beautiful it is. It's the same. Although I hesitate to say that too, because I know comic artists can spend the same amount of time making whole books.
But
You know
that's
what I
for
mean?
you. That's your point of view.
I
It's
know,
not
I know, I,
it's
I
not
know.
universal.
I always feel bad, kind of like standing my ground on one thing because I know there's arguments against and for it. But yeah. Anyway, personally, yeah, that's how I feel.
'Cause, it always depends on the person because some comics are really they take a lot of time and dedication and like I mean, all comics take a lot of time, but you know what I mean? Like some comics
Of
are more
course.
elaborate than others, and some animations are more elaborate than others. But overall, generally, it is safe to say that animation takes way more time than comics. Fight me.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, and a lot of times it can rely on a lot more people too.
What about a minus point for the comics? Do you
Minus
have
point for
one?
comics? I can't really think of one. I would not expect the same kind of, like, timing and pacing from a comic as I would an animation, because that's just not fair. Like, a popular example that I can give as far as, like, comics with their own context of timing, are you familiar with Junji Ito? He does really great horror manga, and he's famous for a very particular style of pacing with his comics, where he reveals his terrifying horrors with a page turn.
Yeah, that's such a powerful technique.
It's such a powerful technique, and there's been a lot of like contention amongst fans with like how people could ever possibly adapt his stuff into animation. Like currently there's been like several attempts. For instance, The one that everyone's aware of that came out, I think a couple of years ago, was like a Junji Ito anime, and it just like butchered the source material. Like it just, from what I heard, it just did not live up to it because it just didn't get the pacing. The animation production was kind of like not great in a lot of spots, so it didn't like effectively bring out the horror of his manga. And since then, there have been two Junji Ito works that have been in the works for a couple of years now. One from Adult Swim and one I think from Netflix just got announced recently. A lot of fans of Ito are kind of like skeptical now because of that. There's a very specific style with how Junji paces and times out his stuff, and to translate that to animation is really tricky.
With the page turn, what I think is different from, comics is with animation, you are a spectator, but in comics, you turn the page. There's an involvement from the person reading it.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's a good way to describe it, actually.
Adapting comic to more of an animated content, this is such a good place for VR, because then there's decisions going from the viewer, not as much as a game, but still a little involvement that could tell a story way more with VR than with animation. That was interesting.
Oh yeah, and that's why VR is also like an insanely cool vehicle for horror now.
Of
Like,
course, there's
from what I've
involvement.
like, I love being involved in and seeing how VR can be utilized with current technology, even if I don't personally have like a VR deck or anything. But
I can't do it. It makes me barf.
yeah, I've heard that like it's disorienting for some
Yeah.
people.